During a busy period at a game development company, it was close to the project's final deadline. Late at night, I was still in the office, working. After several consecutive nights of overtime, the stress was almost unbearable. That evening, it was pouring rain outside, with lightning occasionally streaking across the sky. The rain beating against the windows provided an odd sense of comfort, almost like white noise helping me concentrate. The last of my coworkers had left, and now I was alone in the office. It was already past 8 in the evening, and the world outside was quiet, except for the sound of rain. I knew I had to power through and finish my work before I could leave. I made myself a cup of coffee to fight off the fatigue. As I waited for the coffee to heat up, I suddenly heard a faint sound, like the closing of a door. I looked up and glanced around. The office lighting was dim, and the silence felt more pronounced. I instinctively thought the wine must have blown the door shut, but when I walked out of the kitchen and checked every office, I found all the doors locked. Then I reached my own office and noticed something unsettling. The door was closed. I was certain I had left it open. Not thinking too much about it, I went back to my desk and continued working. As time passed, the weariness hit again, and I decided it was time to call it a night. I shut down my computer, and as the screen went dark, I noticed something in the reflection. Behind me, standing silently, was the figure of a woman. My heart sank, but I didn't scream. I calmly stood up, grabbed my bag, and walked toward the door without turning around. I didn't bother to shut the door behind me. I walked down the hall, every step filled with a rising sense of fear, afraid she would follow me or appear again at any moment. When I felt I was far enough away, I ran out of the building and into the rain. Once inside my car, I tried to catch my breath, but as I looked up at the office window, I noticed something even more disturbing. The light in my office was still on, and through the small gap in the blinds, I could see what looked like a pair of eyes watching me from the inside. I called the security team, and later that night, they checked the office but found nothing unusual. No one was there. But despite the lack of evidence, I knew what I saw, and the eerie feeling from that night has never left me. A long time ago, I worked as a security guard in an office building. It was mid-November, and one of the offices was preparing to decorate for Christmas. The decorations were stored in the basement, along with other supplies. Normally, my job was uneventful, and I usually stood in the lobby for general security. But this cold November Monday would change my view of the job entirely. An employee from one of the offices reported that when they went down to the basement, all the lights were out, and the elevator wasn't working. Initially, it seemed like a job for an electrician, but then I was told that multiple storage room doors had been broken down, suggesting a break-in over the weekend. That's when it became my job to investigate. Since the elevator wasn't working, I had to take the stairs down to the basement. I was the only security guard on duty that day, so I had to go down there alone. I took a flashlight with me since the power was out. I won't lie, walking down there alone made me nervous. The basement was a small maze of corridors filled with storage, electrical equipment, and janitorial supplies. Navigating it in the dark with just a flashlight made the hair on my arms stand up. There were multiple storage rooms for different businesses that rented office space in the building. As I looked around, I saw that many doors had been broken down, some so badly that they looked like they were smashed with an axe. This situation was more serious than I initially thought. As a security guard, I wasn't paid enough to search for potentially dangerous people without a weapon. I checked the broken down rooms, shining my flashlight inside. Despite the damage to the doors, all the supplies seemed untouched. There was no sign of theft. But someone had clearly come down here with a purpose. As I cautiously peeked into each room, I suddenly heard a loud slam from elsewhere in the basement. Then, everything went eerily silent. The background noises, maybe from the boiler or the pipes, all stopped. The basement was now dead silent, and I could hear every step I took, amplified by the quiet. Someone was definitely still down there, and that slam confirmed it. Stupidly, I called out, "Is anyone there?" My voice echoed down the corridor. I continued slowly making my way back, ready to leave. This was no longer my responsibility. It was a job for the police. Just as I was almost to the stairs, I heard heavy breathing coming from around the last corner. The sound was unmistakable, and fear gripped me. Why did I have to be in this situation? I turned off my flashlight and crept closer to see what was around the corner. Strangely, the breathing stopped. I whispered, "Hello," and turned my flashlight back on. Even though the beam wasn't directly aimed at the figure, I could see a tall, hunched person standing against the wall. They were holding some kind of long object, possibly a weapon. I say they because there was no way someone this large could have been a woman. Their face turned slightly as the light hit them, a pale, abnormally long face, and they appeared bald. I didn't stay to look any longer. I bolted past the figure, running towards the stairs, screaming back that the cops were coming and they needed to leave. I sprinted up the stairs, slammed the door shut behind me, and locked it. Then, I called 911. Several NYPD cars showed up, and it became a big scene. At least 4 officers went down to the basement, and I waited nervously in the lobby. After a while, they came back up, without the intruder. They hadn't found anyone. One of the building's electricians arrived to fix the electrical issue, which turned out to be tampering with the circuit box. Even after the lights were restored, the police found no one in the basement. There were multiple stairways the person could have escaped through, so they likely slipped away. Everyone believed my account, those doors hadn't smashed themselves. But after that night, I took a few sick days, unable to sleep. Each night, I found myself lying awake, scanning the dark corners of my room, afraid I might see that towering figure once again. I had just landed a new job, and the working hours were during the graveyard shift at a newly constructed office building. The layout of the office was somewhat odd, shaped like a rectangle, with the elevator and main entrance in the center, and 2 different areas on either side. One side was the production area where we worked, brightly lit and orderly, filled with the hum of activity. The other side was still under construction, dark and quiet, as though no one had ever set foot there. The unfinished side had only a few lights, and most of the time, the security guards would turn them off entirely, figuring no one needed to go there. Unless there was a special situation, like needing to use the restroom, everyone avoided that area. About 2 weeks into the job, one night my coworker started experiencing a terrible headache, so I suggested she take a break and visit the company nurse. We had been told the nurse's office was located at the end of the unfinished side of the building. We walked toward the dimly lit area, passing by unfinished walls and floors, feeling an eerie tension in the air. When we reached the nurse's office, the door was closed, but the lights inside were on. Through the small window on the door, we could see the medical equipment and a bed, but there was no one in the room. We assumed the nurse had stepped out for a moment, so we decided to come back later. About half an hour later, we returned, only to find that the lights in the nurse's office were now off. Feeling a bit uneasy, I decided to try the door handle, and surprisingly, it opened. But what we saw inside made our hearts race. Where the nurse's office once stood, there was now an empty construction site. The floor was bare concrete, and the walls were unfinished. The room had no furniture, no medical equipment, nothing except a faint light coming from an exposed socket. We stood frozen in disbelief, trying to make sense of what had happened. I was certain that just half an hour earlier, we had seen a fully equipped nurse's office. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped drastically. A chill ran down my spine, and my heartbeat quickened as a tense silence filled the air. At that moment, a security guard appeared behind us, asking why we were in an unfinished room. We tried to explain what we had seen earlier, but he clearly didn't believe us. Without saying much, he locked the door and escorted us back to the brightly lit side of the office. Back at the workstation, my coworker broke down in tears, visibly shaken. I, too, was deeply disturbed, unable to shake the feeling that we had just experienced something inexplicable. After that night, no one ever mentioned the incident again, and we never went near that room again either.